What lies beneath a seemingly ordinary hotel? Step into the basement floor and relive Julian's night of endless elevators, breathing doors, and voiceless shadows. This cinematic narration captures every chilling moment from the full horror novel, from the forbidden zero button to the corridor where photographs remember the dead. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and descend with us to where checkout is never an option. The lobby of the Dunbridge Hotel was quiet that night. Not eerily so, just the kind of quiet that wrapped around you like a too thick blanket. Soft jazz murmured from hidden speakers, the scent of lemon polish and aged wood hung in the air. And the only other presence was the night receptionist, half asleep behind the front desk. Julian Hart wheeled his suitcase across the tiled floor, the soft clack of the wheels echoing far louder than they should have in the emptiness. His eyes were tired, reddened from the 8-hour flight and a long walk through cold city streets. He was just looking for a bed, a shower, and a blackout curtain. What he didn't know, what none of the guests knew, was that the hotel had one rule that could never be broken. Never press the button labeled 0. Julian stepped into the elevator, pressing the 4 button for his assigned floor. The chrome doors slid shut with a hiss. He leaned against the wall, blinking slowly. The floor buttons glowed a dim gold, old-fashioned and faintly dusty behind their plastic covers. That was when he saw it. Between the L for lobby and B1 for the basement laundry and maintenance, there was a worn, unlabeled button. The metal was darker, aged, like it had been installed a century ago and forgotten. The number etched into its surface, barely legible in the weak light, was 0. Julian blinked again, then frowned. Weird, he muttered. Maybe it was just an elevator quirk. Maybe an old floor that was no longer in use. But curiosity and exhaustion played tricks on the brain. His finger hovered. He didn't think. He didn't mean to, but his fingertip tapped it. The button lit up red. Not gold, not white. Red, like a glowing eye. The elevator jerked. Not the smooth descent of usual motion, but a sudden drop, a shudder that traveled up his spine. The lights flickered. The floor display blinked erratically before freezing on a single digit. Then everything went still. Julian's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure the elevator had even moved. Had it gone up or down? He couldn't tell. The walls felt narrower now, the light tinged slightly green, and a soft hum vibrated from deep within the mechanical bones of the car. The doors slid open. He hesitated. The kind of hesitation that lives in the gut, old as instinct. But the hallway before him was there, silent, dimly lit with low wall lamps that barely pushed back the gloom. Pale tiles stretched into shadow, and the air that flowed in was cold, not freezing, but wrong, still, and damp, like the breath of something asleep too long. Julian stepped out. The elevator closed behind him. There was no button to call it back. He stood in a narrow corridor that felt disconnected from the world above. The walls were made of cracked stone, not drywall. The floor was not tile. It was uneven concrete, darkened with stains that could have been water or something else. Pipes lined the ceiling, some dripping slowly into rust-colored puddles. And then he heard it, A sound like whispering, faint, impossible to locate, like a voice just on the edge of hearing. Julian. He turned quickly, heart thudding. "Hello?" he called, his voice absorbed by the stone walls. No answer, only silence. Then a faint dragging sound from somewhere deeper in the corridor. Like cloth being pulled across rough ground, Julian moved slowly, his suitcase forgotten beside the elevator. Each step echoed oddly, the reverb wrong. Sharp where it should have been soft. The air smelled different now. Mold, rot, and something metallic. He passed a door. It was made of wood, swollen with moisture. The number on it faded and illegible. Behind it, he thought he heard breathing. Quick, shallow, like someone lying in bed, trying not to make a sound. He didn't stop to check. He kept walking. The corridor seemed longer than it should have been. His pace picked up slightly, then faster, until he was merely jogging. He turned a corner and slammed into a mirror. Not a wall, a mirror. But it didn't reflect him. He stared into the glass. The corridor was there, behind him, as it should be. The door, the pipes, the puddles, but not him. He wasn't in the reflection. And worse, something else was. Something that looked like him. Same hair, same coat, same stance. But the eyes were wrong, wide and black, as if the pupils had swallowed everything else. The smile it wore was thin, bloodless, and slow. Julian stumbled back. The reflection didn't move. A noise rose behind him. A click, 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 like nails tapping stone. He looked back at the mirror. The reflection was gone. Heart pounding, Julian backed away. He had to get back to the elevator. Had to find stairs. Something. Anything. He turned, but the corridor had changed. It was no longer straight. It now forked in two directions, both stretching impossibly long, neither one familiar. The whispering returned, closer now, clearer. "Don't look behind you." His breath caught, then something brushed his neck. He screamed and ran, not knowing which way he went, only that he had to move. The halls twisted, warped. One moment he was in stone tunnels, the next in narrow brick chambers lit by dying yellow bulbs. Doors passed on either side, some open, revealing empty rooms, others closed with something moving behind them. A door slammed behind him. The sound was enormous, as if a vault had shut. Julian pressed his back to the wall, panting. Tears prickled the corners of his eyes. "This isn't real," he whispered. The hallway before him lit up, one flickering bulb at a time, leading to another elevator at the end of the path. Old, iron-framed, the kind with a gate instead of doors. Its light was on. Julian didn't trust it, but it was his only option. He ran. The light snapped off behind him as he passed, one by one. Click, click, click. The sound followed him. He reached the elevator, slammed the gate shut, pressed the only button, up. The elevator groaned. It began to rise. Julian exhaled shakily. As the light of the lower floor disappeared beneath him, he looked down through the slats and saw his reflection watching from the dark below, smiling, waiting. The elevator door slid open with a reluctant groan. releasing Julian onto the fourth floor of the Dunbridge Hotel. The light was softer here, warmer. The hallway was carpeted in deep burgundy, the wallpaper lined with subtle gold patterns, and paintings hung in neat intervals along the walls. It felt like normalcy had returned. But something wasn't right. Julian stepped out, legs shaky, heart still hammering in his chest. His suitcase was gone, left behind, abandoned at the place no one was meant to go. He didn't care. All he wanted was to get inside his room, lock the door, and try to believe he'd fallen asleep on the plane, and none of this had ever happened. He fumbled with his keycard, swiping it against the lock of room 414. The light blinked red, then green. He shoved the door open and staggered in. The room was cozy, almost too cozy, the kind of place designed to lull you into a sense of comfort. A queen-sized bed with a white comforter, a desk with a lamp already on. A window partially cracked, letting in the muted sound of city traffic. It should have been a relief, but the silence was too thick. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. They were trembling. He could still feel the chill of the basement air on his skin, still see those black eyes, that reflection that wasn't his. It didn't move when I did. The thought looped in his mind like a skipping record. He ran his fingers through his hair, forcing himself to breathe slowly. Outside the room, a soft sound broke the quiet. Tap, tap, tap. He froze. It came again. Tap, tap, scrape. Not from the hallway. From the other side of the wall, the shared wall between room 414 and 412. A slow tapping, then something dragging, like nails across wood. Julian leaned in, pressing his ear to the wall. Silence, then thud. He flinched back. A single, deliberate knock against the wall. Not a random sound. Not the kind of noise that comes from settling wood or hotel plumbing. Julian stood, hesitating. Every instinct told him not to do it, but he crossed the room and opened his door. The hallway was empty. Room 412 stood just to the left, its number slightly crooked on the door. He knocked 3 times. Nothing. Julian reached for the handle. It turned, unlocked. He pushed the door open. The room inside was identical to his. Same layout, same bed, same furniture, but colder. The curtains were drawn tight, and the light was off. The shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should, pooling in the corners. And on the bed lay a suitcase. His suitcase. Julian stared at it, stomach lurching. That wasn't possible. He had left it behind. He had run from it. Cautiously, he stepped inside. The suitcase looked untouched. No scratches, no dust. The same airline tag still dangled from the handle. He reached out and unzipped it. Inside were his clothes, folded exactly as he had packed them, but underneath the layers, nestled like something hidden, was a photograph, not one he remembered taking. It showed the hallway from earlier, the one on floor 0, the stone walls, the flickering lights, and in the distance, small and blurred, a figure. Julian's hands went cold. He turned the photo over, scrawled in uneven handwriting, "You came back." Suddenly, the room felt wrong, the air thicker. He backed away, turning for the door, but it slammed shut before he could reach it. The light above flickered. Something moved under the bed. Julian stumbled back as a shape unfurled from the shadows. Long limbs, paler than paper, a face that looked molded from wax, featureless except for a mouth stitched shut. It didn't move toward him, just watched. Watched without eyes. Julian gripped the handle of the door, yanked, pulled. It opened. He didn't look back. He ran into the hallway, heart pounding like a drumbeat in his ears. He didn't stop until he was back in room 414. The door slammed and bolted. He collapsed to the floor. He wanted to leave, to check out, to vanish into the street and never look back. But something told him it wasn't over. Not yet. He rose slowly and walked to the mirror above the dresser. For a moment, he thought everything looked normal. Then his reflection blinked, but he hadn't. Julian didn't sleep. He lay in bed, eyes wide in the dark, covers pulled to his chest like they could protect him from whatever still lurked behind the hotel's walls. The lamp near the bed buzzed with a faint electric hum, occasionally flickering as though unsure it wanted to stay on. Every creak of the building made him flinch. Somewhere below him, far below, the elevator moved. He could hear it. Not the mechanical clunk of normal operation, but something softer, smoother, as if something slid through the shaft without the need for gears or cables. A gliding presence. Each time it stopped, he held his breath, praying it would not arrive at his floor, praying he would not hear it whisper again. But the whispers came. It started as static, so faint he thought it might be in his head. Then words began to form. Not clear, not loud, but distinct. Muffled through layers of space, time, metal. Like a voice filtered through water. Julian, come back down. He covered his ears. No, he whispered to no one. But the elevator had other ideas. At 3:13 a.m., Julian. The hallway light outside his door flicked twice. The sound of the elevator reaching the 4th floor echoed down the corridor, followed by the soft chime that usually signaled someone had arrived. But there were no footsteps, no voices, just a stillness that made the air feel pressed, like a storm had settled inside the walls. Julian stood and crept toward the door. He hesitated, then slowly opened it an inch. The corridor was empty. The elevator stood at the end of the hall with its doors open. Light spilled out into the hallway, pale and unnatural. It wasn't the warm gold of before. It was bluish gray, like moonlight reflected off frost. Julian stepped back. The elevator chimed again. Ding! He closed the door. Then it whispered again, this time closer. We left something for you. The voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. It was inside him now, lodged behind his ears, like a memory he never made. He turned to the mirror near the bed again. His reflection blinked when he did. It didn't smile. It didn't move independently. But it watched, eyes wider than his, unblinking, lips slightly parted. Julian reached for his phone. It had no signal, no Wi-Fi. The battery dropped from 60% to 12 in an instant. He blinked. The mirror cracked. A single hairline fracture across the center, like something had pressed from the other side. He didn't wait. He shoved clothes into his backpack and stormed out of the room. The hallway was silent, unchanged, almost surreal in its normalcy. He turned toward the stairwell. No elevator, no whispering, just steps, one after the other. The stairwell was darker than it should have been, as if the lights above didn't reach far down the shaft. He moved quickly, taking 2 steps at a time, descending toward the lobby. 3rd floor, 2nd, 1st. But when he opened the door to the ground floor, it wasn't the lobby. It was concrete. Old, cracked, damp, the same color and texture as the basement corridor. Julian stumbled back, heart racing. He slammed the door shut and ran back up. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. He burst into the hallway again. Everything looked normal, except his room number was gone. All the doors were blank. He walked up and down the hallway, hands trembling. No labels, no numbers, no signs of anyone. The elevator at the end of the corridor was still open, waiting. Inside, the buttons glowed dimly, all except for one. Button 0 was gone. In its place was a blank metal disc, scratched, darkened, as if it had never been labeled at all. He stepped back. But then the elevator spoke. It wasn't a voice, not truly. It was sound, metallic groaning, cables stretching, gears that didn't belong to any machine. And in between the grinding tones, a whisper. Not a request this time, a command. You're already below. Julian turned and ran. Down the hallway, past door after door. But the hallway stretched longer than it should have. Doors multiplying, light dimming, then silence. He stopped, turned, and saw that the hallway behind him had vanished. It was only wall now, seamless, concrete. Only the elevator remained behind him, silent, open. Julian's breath came shallow and fast. He turned back forward and saw a figure, not a shadow, not a hallucination, a person, or something shaped like one, standing at the far end of the hallway. Too far to see details, but close enough to feel. It started walking. No footsteps, just movement. One step, then another. Julian turned, heart screaming in his chest, and stumbled toward the elevator. He stepped inside and slammed the gate. The buttons flickered, all of them blank, except one, the number 0. It glowed blood red. Julian didn't press it. But the elevator moved anyway, down, down, and as it sank, the walls began to whisper. Not voices this time, laughter. Low, dry, cracked. Like someone who hadn't laughed in years. Like something with lungs full of dust. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. And darkness waited. The elevator doors creaked open, revealing only blackness. Not the absence of light, but the presence of something deeper, a living dark. It didn't recede when the elevator lights spilled forward. It absorbed it, swallowed it whole, like the space beyond had no intention of being seen. Julian stood motionless. He didn't remember pressing the button. He didn't remember agreeing to go back down. but the elevator had brought him here. Again. His hand trembled as it reached for the flashlight clipped to the side of his backpack. He clicked it on. The beam was thin, weak, barely slicing through the dark. But it was something. He stepped forward. The floor beneath him groaned with age, stone, damp, cracked in places. Water dripped somewhere in the distance with the patience of something ancient. Plink, plink, plink. Julian moved slowly, scanning the corridor. The walls were raw concrete, uneven and scarred. Pipes crawled overhead like rusted veins, some hissing quietly as if still alive. The air was heavier down here, thick with mildew and an undercurrent of rot. Every breath tasted like time gone bad. Then the door behind him shut, hard. Julian spun. The elevator had vanished. No, not vanished. The door was still there, but it had been swallowed by a seamless wall of stone. The buttons were gone. No seams, no return. The darkness pressed closer. He turned back toward the corridor. Footsteps echoed ahead of him. Not his. He froze. The sound was wrong, uneven, like something walked with a limp or too many legs. It stopped, then started again, closer. He turned off the flashlight instinctively, plunging himself into near total blackness. His heartbeat became thunder in his ears. He backed into the wall, trying to become small, invisible. The sounds stopped again. A whisper followed. Not words this time, more like breath dragged across glass. Sharp, hissing. Then a scraping sound, long and slow, like nails across concrete. Julian couldn't move. Something passed in front of him, not touching, but close enough that the air shifted. Cold poured off it, like fog rolling through a morgue. Then it was gone. He waited. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time didn't seem to exist here. He turned the flashlight back on. Nothing but the corridor again, stretching into impossible distance. He walked, one step at a time. His footsteps echoed. But now the echo felt slower than his steps, like something was mimicking him. A second too late. He passed doorways, some sealed shut with rusted iron. Others cracked open, revealing nothing but darkness. One had scratching sounds behind it. Another had a flickering light inside, and something just out of view, moving with the twitchy, jerky rhythm of a puppet without strings. He didn't look twice. The corridor forked ahead, left or right. He hesitated. The air to the right was colder, but it smelled cleaner. The left corridor smelled of smoke and something else, burnt hair. He chose the right. It led downward. A spiral staircase made of corroded iron descended into the unknown, lit by a single swaying bulb. Julian gripped the rail. It was sticky, and started down. The creaking metal screamed with each step. The sound bounced around the narrow space like it was trying to wake something below. At the bottom, the staircase ended in front of a metal door. It was marked with a handprint, burned into the surface. Not painted, burned. Julian touched the handle. It was warm. He pushed the door open. Inside was a room, larger than it should have been, far too large to exist beneath the hotel. The walls stretched into shadow. Shapes moved along the edges, slow, patient shapes that never entered the light. In the center was an old hotel bell cart, tipped on its side, with something wrapped in the tangled blanket. He stepped closer. It was a body, shriveled, as if dried out from the inside, skin like paper. The mouth was open, frozen in a scream, and in the eye sockets something shimmered. Not eyes, mirrors, tiny, round, polished to a perfect gleam. Julian backed away. The air vibrated behind him. He turned. The figure from his reflection stood in the doorway. It smiled. Julian couldn't breathe. He ran, past the corpse, deeper into the chamber. The walls pulsed with a faint light now, like a heartbeat. Red. Pause. Red. Something throbbed beneath the floor. He ran until his lungs screamed. He found another door, wooden this time, splintered. He pushed through, and the room beyond was impossible. It was the hotel lobby, exactly the same. The chandelier, the reception desk, even the faint jazz playing on a gramophone in the corner. Except everything was faded, pale, like a memory left out in the rain. Julian stepped forward. The receptionist looked up. It was him. Same face, same eyes, but they were hollow, literally hollow, black voids where his eyes should have been. "You made it back," the doppelganger said. Julian tried to speak. Nothing came out. The other Julian smiled wider. "But you're not supposed to leave." Behind him, the elevator chimed. The doors opened. Inside, darkness waited, waiting. Always. Julian didn't move, because now he finally understood. He had never truly come up from the basement. He had only gone deeper. Julian didn't remember stepping into the elevator again. He only remembered the sensation of sinking, not the mechanical descent of gears and cables, but a slipping, like falling through water so thick it gripped your limbs and slowed your breath. The walls of the elevator dissolved into shadow, and the ceiling above became a circle of flickering light that shrank smaller with each passing second. When the descent stopped, there was no chime, only silence. The doors peeled open with a reluctant groan, revealing a corridor unlike any he had seen before. It was long, impossibly long. The floor was covered in what looked like old, moth-eaten carpet, darkened with stains that didn't follow any pattern. The wallpaper was peeling, discolored by age and adorned with faded patterns of flowers that no longer had color. Just brown ghosts of what once bloomed. Along the corridor walls hung hundreds of framed photographs, each one crooked, each one covered in a thin film of dust and grime. Julian stepped out. The moment he did, the elevator doors closed behind him. He didn't turn to check. He didn't need to. It was gone. It always was. He started walking. The silence in the corridor wasn't empty. It was full of presence. Every step he took was muffled, swallowed by the thick air, like the building itself didn't want noise to exist here. And yet, beneath it, something breathed. He heard it. Inhale, pause. Exhale, pause. But it wasn't his breath. Julian paused beside one of the photographs. He wiped the dust away with a trembling hand. It was a photo of a man, middle-aged, smiling stiffly in front of a hotel room door. Room 414. Julian blinked. He moved to the next photo, a woman this time. Younger, her eyes wide, fixed on something behind the camera. Her smile didn't reach them. Another photo. A child. Dozens more, all different faces, but all with the same expression, as if they had just heard something, as if they were smiling because they had been told to, because not smiling would mean something worse. Julian looked ahead. The corridor had no end, but it had doors, on either side, identical, numberless, old. He stopped in front of one that was slightly ajar. A low, scraping noise came from within. He pushed it open slowly. The room was dark. Dust motes floated in the narrow beam of his flashlight. The air smelled like wet cloth and decay. In the corner of the room stood a wardrobe, tall and crooked. The door was open an inch. From inside, he heard a sound. Not speech, not whispering. A humming, a tuneless, broken humming, like a lullaby played backward, soft at first, then louder as he stepped closer. Julian reached out. The moment his fingers touched the wood, it stopped. Everything stopped. Then the door creaked open. Empty. Nothing inside but hanging coats. He exhaled shakily, stepping back. Then the coats moved. Not from wind. They shifted, as if turning toward him. A hand reached out from between them. Thin, long, pale. It didn't grab him. It simply hovered, fingers twitching in mid-air. Julian backed out of the room, slamming the door shut. The humming returned behind it, faster now, wrong. He ran. Down the corridor, past door after door. The photos on the walls began to change. He saw himself. In one, he was entering the hotel. In another, stepping into the elevator. Another, standing in room 414, staring at the mirror. He passed one that showed him sleeping. He had never slept. He passed one that showed him dead. He stopped. In the photograph, his body was slumped in a chair, mouth agape, eyes hollow. There was something behind him in the frame. A figure made of shadow and angles. Its face was wronged, a blur, as if the photo refused to capture it properly. Julian looked around. The corridor pulsed. Lights above flickered. Somewhere far behind, a door opened with a loud snap. Footsteps. Fast, not running, sliding. He started walking again, faster this time. Another photo caught his eye. Not one of him, one of the receptionist. The same man in multiple frames, always smiling. But in the last one, his smile was broken. A crack ran down his cheek. His eyes were black pits. Julian didn't understand. Why him? Why this hotel? Why was he still here? The corridor finally opened into a wider chamber. It looked like an old dining hall. Dust-covered tables stretched across the floor, with silverware neatly arranged beside cracked plates. Chairs stood neatly aligned. Except for one at the far end. It was overturned, as if someone had left in a hurry. Julian stepped into the room, and then he saw them. The figures, seated at every table, not moving, not breathing, not alive. Their skin was gray, dried, eyes sewn shut with thread that looked older than time. They were dressed as guests. One man held a newspaper. Another had a wine glass frozen halfway to his lips. A child clutched a doll, her head tilted as if caught mid-laugh. Julian moved slowly through them, careful not to touch. And then they twitched, all at once. Heads turned toward him, but their eyes were sewn. No mouths moved, no bodies shifted. Only the sound of thread stretching, tightening. Then a voice boomed from above. "You sat too long, Julian." He turned. The receptionist stood at the far end of the hall, but not the man from the desk. This one was taller, skin pulled too tight, smile split across his face like a wound. "You saw too much." Julian ran. He didn't look back. The corridor returned, or changed again. He couldn't tell. But behind him, the figures scraped their chairs back, one by one, their sewn eyes bleeding. Julian didn't stop until he reached another elevator. Old, metal gate, dusty control panel. Only one button worked. He pressed it. The elevator rose. Inside, silence returned, but the air was colder now, and when he looked in the mirror behind the control panel, he wasn't alone. The elevator rose in silence. Julian stood motionless, clutching the railing as the ancient car creaked and groaned with each passing floor. There was no panel anymore, no buttons, just smooth, dark metal where the controls had once been. It was taking him somewhere. Not where he wanted to go, but where the hotel had decided he belonged. He dared to glance at the mirror again. The shape behind him was gone, but its absence was worse than its presence. Like the air had been hollowed out, the elevator stopped. No chime. The doors opened with a reluctant hiss, revealing a hallway unlike the others. This one was wrapped in sound, not music, not whispering, breathing. 100 breaths, maybe more, all shallow, all wet, all unseen. Julian stepped out. The walls were lined with what looked like fabric, but when he touched it, it was skin. Soft, cold, veined beneath the surface. The ceiling above pulsed faintly, as if something immense and sleeping stirred beyond it. The floor beneath his shoes gave slightly, like he was walking on muscle. The sound of breathing came from the walls themselves. Each breath had its own rhythm, its own wheeze, like lungs that had forgotten how to function properly. He moved forward. Lights above flickered as he passed beneath them, casting jagged shadows that danced across the strange, living walls. He felt watched, not seen, but felt. 1,000 invisible eyes staring through skin and plaster. Then came the voices. They didn't emerge from mouths. They came from the very structure. The wall to his right bulged suddenly. A faint face pressed outward from beneath the surface, featureless but familiar. It moved as though mouthing words, but there was no mouth. No sound, still. He heard it, not with ears, inside his skull. He doesn't belong. He broke the path. He touched the mirror. he made it bleed. Julian stumbled back, heart slamming in his chest. Another voice rose from the floor. He is a crack in the ceiling, a breath we cannot hold. The fabric of the walls began to shift, stretch, ripple with silent agony. Faces formed, melted, reformed, each one straining forward, mouths that never were pressing against the membrane, trying to speak, trying to scream, but only silence came. Julian ran. He turned a corner, hoping for escape, for a stairwell, for anything that looked man-made. Instead, he found a chamber, a circular room with no ceiling. The sky above was black and full of stars that twitched like dying nerves. In the center of the room stood a massive structure, a column of bone and wire, wrapped in what looked like old hotel linens, stitched together with hair. Around it, figures kneeled, dozens, maybe more, all of them facing inward, all of them missing their mouths, sewn shut, torn away, some simply smoothed over, like clay without a sculptor's care. And they prayed. Julian couldn't hear the words, but he felt them. They pulsed through his chest like thunder underwater. Words with weight, with shape, with memory. One figure turned, its head tilted upward, toward him, and then they all moved, in unison. They rose to their feet, slowly, like puppets being pulled from the ground. Not one of them had eyes, not one had a voice, but they saw him, they knew him. Julian backed away, but there was no door, no exit, only the breathing walls behind him and the voiceless congregation before him. Then the column in the center began to pulse. It opened, unfolded, like a cocoon made of teeth. Inside was a single chair, empty, waiting. Julian heard it then, the voice not from a mouth, not from a throat, from the ceiling, from the air. Sit, Julian. He shook his head. Sit, or they will. The figures stepped forward, their movements wrong. Stiff and fluid all at once, as if they had forgotten how to be human, as if the memory of movement had rotted inside them. Julian turned and ran. The walls closed behind him, sealing the chamber off. He didn't look back. He found a corridor, narrower, winding, carved not by man, but by something older. The walls here were bone, ribbed. The floor was carpeted with discarded pages, torn from books he couldn't read. Every step made them crunch and crackle like brittle leaves. A sound followed him, not footsteps, something dragging, wheezing, closer with every corner turned. He found another elevator, not metal, wood, rotting, held together by nails made of teeth. He climbed inside. There was no button, only a string. He pulled it. The elevator dropped, faster than before. A free fall. Wind screamed through unseen cracks. And beneath it all, the breathing never stopped. The elevator landed without sound. No crash, no jolt. Just an abrupt stillness, like the air had thickened and frozen time for a breath. Julian opened his eyes. The walls around him were no longer wood. They were flesh, pulsing, alive. Each panel stretched and twitched with every breath the structure took. Thin veins ran like tree roots across the surface, pulsing faintly with a dull red glow. He stepped out into darkness, but not empty darkness. It pressed in from all sides. Heavy and humid, it clung to his skin, slid down his spine, filled his ears with a low vibration that wasn't quite a sound. A corridor stretched ahead. It curved unnaturally, as if grown instead of built. The floor beneath his feet squelched faintly with each step, damp and warm. The snow here was worse than anything he'd encountered. Rot glared over rot, like the breath of something long buried and finally waking. Then he heard it. The door. It breathed. At first he thought it was the corridor again, the walls inhaling and exhaling like before. But this was different, more deliberate, rhythmic. Sss. Pause. Thump, thump, sss. He followed the sound. The corridor opened into a chamber, circular and dimly lit by strands of glowing fungus that crept across the ceiling like tendrils. And in the center of the room, embedded in the far wall, was a door. But it was no door. It was made of muscle and bone, a vertical slit pulsing in sync with the chamber's heartbeat. Each breath it took made the room shift slightly, like it was drawing Julian closer. The edges of the doorway twitched. Thin strings of sinew stretched and snapped with each subtle movement. Julian stood frozen. Something was behind it, something large and awake. He took a step forward, drawn not by curiosity, but by something deeper, compulsion. The kind of pull that exists in nightmares, when you know the thing ahead will kill you, but your feet move anyway. Then the door spoke, not in words, not even in thought, but in feeling. It wanted him, not just to pass through, but to join. The skin around the frame rippled. A moan escaped from deep within the wall. Not human, not animal. A sound made by pressure, bone, and time. Then the slit opened, just slightly, revealing a glimpse of what lay beyond. Darkness. No, not darkness. Void. Julian staggered back. A whisper rushed out from the opening. It sounded like his own voice. "Julian, let me in." He backed away. The door opened wider. "Let me wear you. Let me remember what skin feels like." Julian turned to run, but the room had changed. The corridor was gone. The walls now smooth, sealed. The way he had come in had been swallowed. Behind him, the breathing door began to tremble. Footsteps echoed from the chamber's edge, slow, wet, dragging. He turned. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was him, or something that had borrowed him. Same face, same clothes, but its eyes were gouged out, black holes leaking something thick and dark. Its smile was wrong, too wide. Lips pulled back until the corners tore slightly with every step. "You left me behind," it whispered. Julian couldn't move. His limbs were ice. "I waited in the mirror. You never came back." It reached for him. Its fingers split in two, becoming tendrils tipped with bone. Julian stumbled back into the breathing door. The flesh of it pulsed against his spine, warm and hungry. He turned and slammed both hands against it, trying to push it closed. But it was opening now. Wide. The air rushed past him, a vacuum of screams and memories. A voice, deeper than anything he had heard, spoke from beyond. He is hollow. He will echo well. Julian screamed as the tendrils grabbed him, dragged him, pulled him toward the pulsing doorway. But just as he crossed the threshold, everything went still. He opened his eyes. He was in the hotel room again, room 414. Morning light poured in from the window. The bed was made. The TV played the news softly in the corner. He was sitting in the chair by the mirror, alone, breathing. He stood slowly, staggered to the mirror, and looked at himself. Normal, almost. But when he smiled, the mirror didn't. The mirror didn't smile. Julian stared at his reflection for what felt like hours, waiting for it to blink, move, react. But it didn't. The man in the glass remained perfectly still, perfectly blank, the smile frozen like a photograph left in the sun too long. Julian turned away. The hotel room had returned to its original state. Beige wallpaper, flickering overhead light, distant sound of city traffic muffled by the window. Everything in its place. Everything tidy. Too tidy. He walked to the door, opened it. The hallway was there. Soft carpet beneath his feet. Doors lining both sides. Even the number on his door. 414 was back. But the air tasted wrong. It smelled sweet like perfume. Old, faintly floral, clinging to the throat. Beneath it, something coppery. He stepped into the hall. The elevator stood at the end, doors closed. But this time, the numbers above it were changing. They flickered between one symbol, just 0, again and again. Julian took the stairs. He needed to leave, escape. The lobby, the front desk, the street, anything but that elevator again. He descended quickly, every step echoing harder than the last, until his breath came ragged and his shirt clung to his back with sweat. 1 flight, 2, 3, 4. Then the door to the ground floor. He pushed it open and stepped into darkness. No lobby, just a black room. No light source, no texture, just pure shadow stretching in every direction. Julian turned, but the stairwell door was gone. He was alone, except he wasn't. She was there. He didn't see her at first, only felt her. The shift in the air, the cold that spread out from a single point like ink in water. A scent rose around him, that same perfume, stronger now. Then the sound began, a soft hum, a lullaby. Wordless and trembling, she stepped from the shadows. Or maybe the shadows peeled off her. A woman, tall, thin, her hair hanging in wet strands down her face. She wore an old-fashioned dress, black lace torn at the hem. Her face was wrong. Not monstrous, not deformed, just unfinished, like the idea of a face someone tried to sculpt but stopped halfway. Eyes too far apart, mouth too small, cheeks stretched taut like plastic wrapped over bone. But she sang. Julian backed away. She took a step forward. With each step, the room pulsed. The darkness thickened. Shapes moved behind her, not people. Echoes. Outlines of others who had come here before, some crawling, some hanging from the ceiling, some folded in corners like forgotten coats. She stopped, lifted a hand. The hum grew louder, not just in his ears now, in his teeth, in his spine, in the hollow behind his eyes. Julian clutched his head. "Stop," he whispered. But she didn't. The song shifted. Now it had words, not English, not any language he knew, but he understood it. He came down when he should have stayed up. He saw the mirror blink. He fed the door that breathes. He broke the silence. Her fingers stretched longer, nails blackened. Her mouth opened wider than it should have. The song became a scream. Julian fell to his knees. The air thickened, pressing in on his chest, stealing breath. Then, silence. She stood inches from him now, her face bent down toward his. And in her hand, she held something. A key. Black metal, cold. She reached out, pressed it into his palm, closed his fingers around it. "You must open what they sealed." Her voice was inside him. Then she vanished. So did the room. Julian found himself standing in front of a door, one he had never seen before. Tall, wooden, cracked down the center. No number, just a lock. And in his hand, the key. He turned it. The lock clicked. The door opened. Inside was a staircase that spiraled downward, carved in black stone. And far below, something was crying. Not screaming, not whispering, crying. A woman's voice, echoing through the dark, broken by silence, mended by grief. Julian stepped inside, and the door closed behind him. The door sealed behind Julian with a sound like flesh meeting flesh, soft but final. He stood at the top of a spiral staircase carved into black stone, the steps descending into a shaft of cold air and endless echo. The sound of weeping continued below, a woman's sobs echoing off the walls. Soft at first, then trembling, then broken. Julian gripped the iron handrail, slick with condensation, and began his descent. Each step groaned, not with weight, with breath. He paused and touched the wall. It pulsed under his fingers, like the slow beat of a dying heart. The deeper he went, the colder the air became, until his breath fogged in front of his face. The crying below grew clearer, more human, too human. He called out, "Hello?" The crying stopped. Silence swelled, thick and sudden. Then a voice answered, "You're almost here." Not a whisper. A sigh pressed through teeth. Julian swallowed and kept moving. He didn't know how many steps he'd taken. The descent had no end in sight, and the shaft twisted in on itself. The architecture made no sense. Sometimes the steps curved outward. Sometimes they sloped sideways. Gravity bent differently here. He passed doors set into the walls. Narrow, arched, with no handles. Behind one, something scratched faintly. Behind another, something knocked. Once, then twice. He didn't stop. Eventually, he reached a landing. A stone arch opened into a narrow hallway, damp and full of mildew. The floor was tiled with broken names, old, etched letters half erased by time. Every footstep he took landed on someone forgotten. At the end of the hall stood a door. Wood, warped, held together with nails that had begun to rust into the grain. A black mark had been burned into the surface, a symbol that hurt to look at. It twisted as he stared, as if it didn't want to be remembered. The woman's voice came from within. Please. It was weak now. Not a ghost, not a monster, just tired. Julian pushed open the door. Inside was a room with no corners. The walls curved in on themselves, ceiling and floor blending into a seamless whole. And in the center, sitting in a cracked porcelain chair, was the woman, the same one from the black room. Her dress was torn in new places. Her hair hung limp across her face. Her hands clutched her chest as if holding something broken inside. The air around her shimmered slightly, like heat off pavement. Julian stepped closer. She lifted her head, and now she had a face. Almost. It shifted as he looked at it, flickering through different versions, none of them settling. But her eyes stayed the same, wide, lonely. "You brought the key," she said. He nodded. "I don't know what it opens," he said quietly. Her gaze fell to the ground. "Yes, you do." The floor between them began to peel away. Tiles cracked. Dust rose. And beneath, a trapdoor revealed itself. Old iron, set into the stone. At its center, a lock. Julian stepped forward, knelt, and inserted the key. The lock resisted, then gave. The trapdoor creaked open. A shaft descended into a space that should not exist. The walls were flesh. The air hissed. And deep below, something breathed. The woman stood. She placed a hand on Julian's shoulder. "You can still go back." He looked up at her. "No, I can't." Her smile was barely there. She stepped aside. Julian climbed down the iron rungs into the pit. The air thickened. It smelled like copper and burnt flowers. Voices whispered from the walls. Not coherent words, but memories. His own, spoken back to him in strange tongues. His childhood, his regrets, his worst thoughts. All fed back to him. At the bottom was another hallway. This one was narrow, low-ceilinged. As he walked, the sound of steps followed. His own, and something else. Dragging, dripping. He turned a corner, and there it was. A staircase, spiraling upward, but not toward light, not toward escape. Its steps were broken, some missing, some melted. And the higher it rose, the more it twisted, like it wanted to escape itself. Julian placed one foot on the bottom step. It screamed, a deep metallic wail, like 1,000 rusted pipes groaning at once. He took another step, and the walls began to close. Breathing faster, the air grew hotter, tighter. From above, a voice called. His own voice, screaming, begging. Julian climbed. The staircase bent back on itself, folding like ribs, enclosing him in a spine of ancient stone. Every step he took was heavier, every breath more stolen. Then he reached a platform. A mirror waited there, tall, framed in black bone. His reflection looked normal, calm, too calm. Then it opened its mouth, and his voice came out. You were never meant to leave. The mirror shattered, and the staircase vanished. Julian fell into nothing, into himself. Into the place the hotel had built just for him. Julian hit the ground hard, but it wasn't stone. It was soft, wet. The surface rippled beneath him like flesh, like a living floor that reacted to his weight. He scrambled to his feet, breath ragged, eyes darting in every direction. But there was no direction here. No walls, no ceiling, just a vast expanse of nothing. Pulsing, breathing. It was warm, too warm. The kind of warmth that came from the inside of something. A muffled sound echoed from below. Thump, thump. Like a heartbeat just beneath his feet. Then the whispers returned. But this time, they weren't behind walls or inside his skull. They were around him, above him, inside the air. He fell through the mirror. He wore the reflection. He swallowed the key. Julian spun in place, searching for the source, but the space refused to obey. With every turn, the ground shifted, folding inward, bending like muscle. His surroundings pulsed with lightless shadows, rising and falling like the lungs of something asleep and dreaming. Then he saw it, in the distance, though distance meant nothing anymore. A door. Wooden, familiar, marked with 414. His room. Somehow. Still waiting, Julian walked. Each step sank slightly into the living ground. The closer he got, the more the air resisted. It grew thick, syrupy, dragging at his limbs, trying to pull him down, back into the floor. He reached the door, put his hand on the knob. It was cold. Not room temperature cold, grave cold. The kind that made fingers numb on contact. He turned it. The door opened with a slow, shivering groan, and on the other side was the Dunbridge Hotel lobby. Quiet, empty, just as it had been when he arrived. The same chandelier, the same front desk, the same soft jazz playing from nowhere. He stepped through. Behind him, the door clicked shut. He was back where it started, but not really. Everything was off. The lights too dim, the ceiling too low. A hum vibrated through the floor, constant, like something deep below was still breathing. Julian walked to the front desk. No one was there. He rang the bell. Once. The sound echoed too long. Then a figure appeared from the back room. Not the receptionist. Not anyone he had ever seen. It looked like a man, sort of, but its face was blank. Smooth skin stretched where eyes should be. A mouth carved too wide across the jaw. Its suit was perfectly pressed. Its hands trembled as it placed a guest book on the counter. Julian stepped closer. The guest book opened on its own. His name was already written, not in ink, in something darker, thicker, still wet. Next to it, checked in at 2:13 a.m. No checkout time. Julian looked up. I want to leave. The figure tilted its head. You can. Its voice was not spoken aloud. It came from behind his ears, dry and patient. You just need to check out. Julian pointed to the guest book. How? The figure smiled and gestured toward the elevator. It now stood in the center of the lobby, larger than before. The doors were open. Inside, only one button. Julian stared, then shook his head. No, no more elevators. The figure didn't speak, didn't move, just smiled. Julian backed away, turned for the front door. It was there, glass and brass. He ran for it. But as he reached out, the door blinked. Then it vanished. Behind it, another hallway stretched. Stone walls, dripping pipes, flickering lights. The basement, again. He turned. The hotel was gone. He was in the corridor, and on the wall beside him, a new photograph had appeared, framed in silver, dustless. It showed him, standing at the front desk, eyes wide, mouth open. The figure behind the counter, smiling with sewn lips. Julian screamed. The sound echoed, warped, twisted. Then something behind the wall whispered, "There is no checkout, Julian. There never was." And far below, the elevator began to rise again.